The race to be the next president of France, but how right-wing will he or she be? As Republicans choose their candidate for next year's election, will they be able to stand up to the National Front? And how are the French being influenced by the growing anti-establishment mood globally? This is Inside Story. Hello and welcome to the programme. I'm Martine Dennis. Are the French heading for a sharp lurch to the right? They're due to head to the polls to elect their next president in less than 6 months. The chances of François Hollande being re-elected are not looking good. Opinion polls say the socialist leader is the most unpopular president in recent history. So does that leave the door open for the National Front? Far-right leader Marine Le Pen is currently doing very well in the polls. Add to that Donald Trump's victory in the US and Britain's voting for Brexit, and more shockwaves wouldn't be a surprise. The French Republican Party's election of its presidential candidate is the first event in this peculiar election cycle. French voters are choosing their nominee in the first round of polls. The two leading candidates from Sunday's vote then go to the second round in a week's time. Campaigning is dominated by concerns over immigration and the threat of terrorism. All right, let's take a look now at some of the main players in French politics. Marine Le Pen is leader of the National Front. Her far-right, anti-immigration, anti-European Union and anti-Islam views are boosting her popularity. Nicolas Sarkozy is the former president who's looking to return to the Élysée Palace. He's been using the terrorist attacks of the past year in Paris, Nice and other cities to call for tougher security laws. Then there's François Hollande, whose the opinion polls say is the most unpopular president in recent French history. The current president and socialist leader is bidding to be re-elected. Right, let's introduce our guests now. Here in the studio in Doha, we have Renaud Girard. He's the chief foreign correspondent for the Figaro newspaper. In Paris, we have François Géret, president of the French Strategic Analysis Institute. And in London, we have Olivier Guita, who's managing director of Global Strat consultancy firm. Welcome to you all. Can I start with you, Renaud, as you're here in the studio with me, and ask you to identify for us what exactly are the prevailing political winds at the moment in France?
It's true that there is a big shift to the right in France because actually, you had the difference between France and America or Britain is that in America or Britain, the right and the far right is the same party. The Republicans, for instance, you have basic Republicans, and you have Tea Party. In France, you have two parties that do not talk to each other and fight each other and do not make electoral alliances. You don't have that system in the left. In the left, François Hollande was elected also with the votes from the far left. But in France, the right is divided between the right and the far right. So, but still, we know that probably it's 99% of chance we will have a right president, not a far right, because Marine Le Pen, because there's 2 rounds in the French elections, which is a big difference with America. In America, maybe if we were in America and France, maybe Marine Le Pen would be president, but you need 2 rounds. And she does not have any ally. So she can score a very good score, like a huge score for French politics, which would be 30%, 32%. But since she doesn't have, for the time being, any ally, she cannot make it to the second round. So probably we will have that the winner of the primary within the right-wing party, which is called Les Républicains, will be probably the next president.
OK, let's go to François in Paris. What sort of impact would you say have these surprises, these shocks that we've witnessed over recent months, the Brexit vote in the UK and the Trump victory in the US? What sort of impact is that having on the French political landscape?
Yes, it has been indeed a double surprise, which has demonstrated the fact that in Europe it was possible for a major country to get out of the European Union, and some kind of taboo has been broken. So it demonstrates that now we are seeing some problems, difficulties, hurdles in the UK, but it's not a disaster. I mean, the UK can overcome those economic and financial problems. The UK is not in total disarray. So it demonstrates that it is possible. When it comes to the United States, it demonstrates also the strength of the distrust of many voters who belongs to the working class, who belongs to those who have been disappointed by the traditional politics, including people who were traditionally in favor of the Democratic Party. So Trump is a demonstration of the surprise which can be created by the distrust and the disarray of large parts of the American people who do not recognize the traditional politics as representative of their own interest.
Okay.
And to some extent,
can I take that
could happen in France.
Okay, let's go to Olivier then. Is there in France that same distrust of the established political elite, the political establishment? Does that distrust exist in France today?
Oh yes, very much so. I mean, as we've seen, I mean, there's a clear reason why Marine Le Pen is ahead in the polls for the first round. Is really a rejection of the establishment, of not being able to address the unpolitically correct issues of immigration and security. She has been, for a long while, the only one that had the courage, if you will, of talking about those issues. Now the right is playing catch up, and you see a lot of the candidates being close to the far right on many of those issues. But you know, unfortunately, what we will have to see is how much of an impact this will have for the following 6 months. If something major were to happen, then a scenario might be changing in terms of what the electoral vote will be.
And Renaud, is it fair to say then that the trauma that the country has been through in the last 12 months or so with regard to the terrorist attacks, that has definitely moved the Republican Party at least to the right, to seize the ground that's traditionally held by the National Front?
Yes, of course. There was a campaign on the French identity, and so on. Who are we? Do we have Christian roots, and so on? And our values were Republican values, secularism, and so on. But I think there's two different traumas in the French electorate. The first one is this kind of, this security thing, this terrorist attacks, and so on. France being the target of these Islamist groups. But also there is a long-term disarray in France, which is actually the state was totally unable to provide jobs. And people are now reluctant to vote for the socialists because French people start to think that, oh, this does not work. I mean, we have been state policies for the last 30, 40 years. The taxes are very high and the laws, the work laws are very tough in France. And it doesn't work. I mean, France does not. The French economy doesn't work as well, as smoothly as the Dutch economy or the German economy, which are neighbors. So this you have at the same time a long-term distrust and a short-term distrust, a new distrust, if you like, caused by this immigration and this security. And of course, you had, of course, a new phenomenon, which is all these migrants coming from Libya, from Syria, whatever, but it's only 2 years ago. So yes, it's a big change. So one is coming up to adding to the other one, which is a basic knowledge that the state doesn't work in France.
Francois, for many countries in Europe, the refugee crisis that Renaud has just alluded to has proved to be the defining issue in many ways. Is that the case in France, that the refugee crisis has filtered now into the national debate and almost seamlessly moved into questions of identity, questions of Islamophobia, into questions of security?
Well, actually the issue of xenophobia is not a new one. The fear of migrants is not a new fear as well. But it is true that the lack of efficient response to the huge and continuing crisis in Libya and the war in Syria and the relative destabilization of the Middle East and Africa as well has created a new impetus, and the EU has not been able to cope with this problem. And France, at the same time, has not been able to find the right answer. And maybe the Hollande administration has not been able to take bold initiative in this field. So at the present, there is a sense of instability created both by unemployment, migration, and the risk of terrorism, and all this create a package which transform the sensitiveness of French voters, and which will create a new situation which will impact on the votes.
And Olivier, should we at this stage discount the socialists? François Hollande has overseen some of the worst moments in recent French history, and as we've already said, is polling desperately low, if we can believe the polls. But should we therefore just discount the socialists? And that this is a look at this upcoming election as basically a battle of the right between the Republican parties trying to fend off the far right of Marine Le Pen?
Look, I think we shouldn't discount the socialists. We should discount François Hollande because he has no chance of winning. But there's one person that we haven't mentioned today, is Emmanuel Macron, his former Minister of Economy, that is still highly rated in the polls. So I think it's just a matter of person rather than party. But in the overall scheme of things, people would start looking at giving a chance to politicians that have not been around for 30 years and that have shown how failed is their policy. And that's what is really worrisome in terms of Marine Le Pen popularity, because she hasn't been tried. There will be this effect of newness and this effect of, look, I told you so. And that's what she's been playing, is saying, look, the right is just mirroring exactly the policies I had in mind 10 years ago. And that's really crucial when it comes to next year's election, is how much the right will be able to steer some of the people that move to Marine Le Pen towards them.
Okay, so Renaud, if we can discount François Hollande, it sounds as though Monsieur Macron may have a chance, but
Yes,
we are seeing very much a continuation of this theme, which is basically speaking anti-establishment, and that is what we're seeing at play in France as well?
Yes, yes, of course. It's anti-establishment, though for the the Republican Party, the primary of the right, the three winners or the three best ranked were all from the establishment. I mean, they all have been either prime minister or president. So, yes, of course, people want to see new faces. A lot of promises have been given to the French public for the last 30 or 40 years, that, you know, we need some growth, but, you know, I swear, I mean, will create jobs, I mean, unemployment will be down, and we have in France a 10% or 11% unemployment, when in America or even Germany it's 5%, which is a huge difference. And when you are young in America or in Germany, you can find a job. In France, it's much more difficult. And this problem has not been dealt with. There's another problem with taxation in France. I mean, if you're a young entrepreneur, it's a little bit suicidal to go to France, because to stay in France, because the tax system is so stupid. I mean, and so. It doesn't work.
Wasn't it Gérard Depardieu who said that he'd take up residency in Russia?
Yeah,
I think it was.
Exactly, because it takes you like everything. I mean, I can give you just a very short example. Okay, you want to start a TV, for instance, in France, and you have to buy some small TV. You cannot deduct that from your balance sheet. In England or in America, everywhere, you can of course deduct, because it's an investment that you have done for the company. In France, you cannot. So French investors, French entrepreneurs are discouraged to stay in France and to do so. So all this system must change, and the left and the right have not been able to change it for 30 years. And all these plagues are well known. Everybody knows. But everybody even know the solutions, but nobody does anything.
So, Francois, from what we're hearing, it sounds as though there's considerable disillusionment in France, and people feel as if they're not being heard, they're not being taken, their concerns are not being dealt with by the established political class. This all sounds rather familiar, doesn't it? Why could we not, therefore, see a complete electoral shock and see the National Front end up in power in France?
Well, obviously, there has been a huge shift in the French population, which has been caused largely by the failure of the Socialist Party to respond to the aspiration of the middle class, of the working class, the frustration of the people because of the unemployment. And today the traditional left has disappeared. The Socialist Party is totally fragmented, and there is no unity behind Hollande. That's the reason why he has no chance for a new presidency. So this is a tremendous change, and people are asking for new solutions, and they are not interested in the traditional right. They want new people, they want new program, they want new ways and means in order to recover from the economic difficulties. And they can have a choice between new figures, such as Emmanuel Macron, or the solution of the Front National and the radical propositions of Marine Le Pen. The problem is that the Front National has not the ability to govern the whole country, is limited to 35, maybe 40%. It's necessary to count on that, and every president elected will have to consider that there are 35% of the population which is in favor of the program of the National Front. So that's an element which will last and in the French politics, and everybody, every new elected president will have to take that into account. It's a long-term trend in French politics.
Okay, Olivier, this must be like music to the ears of Marine Le Pen, but I'm wondering how the Republican Party is going to make up this ground. We've heard already that Mr. Sarkozy is proposing some fairly radical right-wing proposals. For instance, the children who are born to foreign parents maybe not having full citizenship rights, things like that that traditionally would have fallen to the far right, to Marine Le Pen. I mean, can the Republican Party shift significantly to carry up some of these votes who are looking towards the far right?
A couple of things. I mean, to take on your previous question about Marine Le Pen chances, a couple of quick things that you need to remember. The polls are usually wrong by at least 10% when it comes to her vote. So if she's polling between 30 and 35, it means that probably she'll do 40 to 45. But as Renaud mentioned, it's a two-tier election, and if she doesn't get elected in the first round, there's literally no chances for her to be elected in the second round because nobody is going to get closer to her and make alliance. To get to your point about les Républicains, a couple of things also that are important to remember is that Marine Le Pen is gaining a lot of the votes, not only from les Républicains' electoral vote, but from the left, which is the main shift, if you will. Les Républicains will have to make a program that will be closer to Marine Le Pen in terms, as you mentioned, in terms of security, identity, immigration, but also one point we haven't discussed, and that is central to where I'm sitting today in London, is the European Union. Marine Le Pen is the only one that is really running against the Union and for a Frexit, if you will, of France of the European Union. That is one aspect that has been, I think, overlooked by candidates. And they will have to address this because when it comes to the economy and the issues that are at stake today in France, the European Union has a big hand in that. And I think that les Républicains would be quite wise not to leave this ground for Marine Le Pen to run on.
Okay, and I'll give the final word to Renaud. We haven't got very much time, I'm afraid. Can we, having said all that has been said, can we therefore expect a big surprise in French electoral politics over the next 6 months?
Yes, we can expect a big surprise, a newcomer. We can also expect, I mean, it's 50-50, an old-comer like Juppé. Juppé is like center-left. He used to be prime minister. He didn't do a lot of reforms. So it will be like Hollande, but a little bit better, but the same thing, you know, the same state, very important, and state supposed to be your daddy doing everything in France. But we can have a surprise with Emmanuel Macron, which is a new kind of socialist, of liberal, if you like, socialist and liberal at the same time. Or we can have a surprise, of course, with Marine Le Pen. But for Marine Le Pen, I would say it's more than 2022 than 2017.
Okay, can I thank you all, gentlemen, very much. Olivier Guittard, François Géret, and of course Renaud Girard, thank you very much indeed. And as ever, thank you for watching the programme. You can see it again anytime you like by going to the website, aljazeera.com. If you want more discussion, you can go to our Facebook page, facebook.com/AJ Inside Story. There's a Twitter sphere as well, our handle @AJ Inside Story. From me, Martine Dennis, and the whole team here in Doha is bye for now.